I'm Austin,
And I'm Zach,
and between 2 cups of coffee,
and good conversation
we'll talk about everything from A.
to Z. And it ties into kind of what I've been thinking about this week and I was listening to a podcast this morning, but they have basically, you are what you think about,
Mm-hmm.
and you do what you think about, like that, and so just the whole mindset of we can get ourselves into a rut and run down that rut,
Yeah.
and that's where it's been a real, moving from job to job and looking at it that way, it's like, okay, what am I telling myself that is causing me to stay or do or whatever,
Right.
but do whatever I want. I don't know, I'm not, whatever I am doing in the moment, that's what I'm telling myself I need to do, or it may not be the right thing.
Yeah.
Like
But it's the right now thing.
it's
Yeah.
what I'm told right now, but
Yeah, and I think human beings, like just in general, I think where we are in our life is a byproduct of like what our intent is day to day. Because we're so adaptable, like you do something consistently for enough days in a row, like it's normal. Like it's crazy how quickly we acclimate to things, and that can be good or bad.
yeah.
So like I think that's why people get vacation hangovers too, because they try and put all their fun in like 1 or 2 weeks, and you get a vacation hangover. You're like, shit, like I've been doing this for 2 weeks now. Now I got to go immediately back to that. This is what's comfortable now.
Yeah.
And you're in that. You almost feel worse coming back. At least I have whenever I've taken like a week vacation. If I'm not doing something I love,
Yeah.
when I come back, it's not like I'm recharged and refreshed, which is what a vacation. It just makes me realize how much like I don't want to go back.
Exactly. How much you don't
Instead
like the job.
of being like, okay, I'm refreshed and ready to get back to work, it's like, can we have another 6 weeks of this?
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's where, when from a financial point, that's where a lot of people come with. They go on vacation to get away from that.
Yeah.
They spend the credit cards, or they spend extra money, and they come back and then they hate the job, and then they hate the credit card bill that came in the next month.
Then they don't want
too.
to pay it 'cause they're like, man, that wasn't even worth it.
So yeah, it's not worth it. Then now they're, they feel that guilt of, now I've got $10,000 in credit card
Yeah,
debt.
and I'm not happy.
And I'm not happy. The power of our.
Yeah. So how much did you watch? Quite a bit of that David Goggins?
I watched
stuff,
it.
or-
I watched it all. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Both of them.
What was your takeaway from that guy?
I need to step it up. You know.
Mm.
It just, his attitude and his no excuses, and that's where something I've always believed, but then on the other side of it, I've always been like, we're human. We're gonna find excuses, and if we don't do what we say we're gonna do, we're gonna find an excuse.
Right.
And so, but for him to come across with that and all the things that he did, 30 miles with shin splints and fractures in his legs,
And he had already run like 70.
yeah, just running a marathon to me is
a lot. Yeah, I attempted
an
one and I
accomplishment.
got 19 miles and I felt like my feet were going to break. Like, so to do 100 miles and to never train, like he didn't even train for it. He was like powerlifting and stuff. And he was like, I think he said he was like 265 at that time running that. So like, you think about a marathon runner, or the ultra marathon runners are tiny. They're like 130 pounds
exactly.
at the most. They're probably more like 100 pounds, or like they're small.
And it just blew my mind. Like even the thought of just running 100 miles.
Yeah.
And then
In one sitting.
And then he sits there and is like, it was what he had, like 24 hours.
Yeah, he had 24 hours to do it.
24 hours to to run 100 miles, and I'm surprised he even got to 70.
Yeah.
You know, at
that's a
the
lot.
first, with the first initial push. I mean, there's no telling what in the middle of that, like, did he rest every 20 or because I just, but that's where our mind is. Like, our mind says there's no way I can do that. There's no way me can do that. And so you sit there with that and like, oh well, that guy's superhuman.
Yeah.
And so that he's him and I'm
he's
me.
always been. But the great thing about his story is he wasn't always that way.
Exactly.
That's what's he was a cockroach spared Ecolab.
Yeah.
And to go from that and 300 pounds to I think he lost 100 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
To make the minimum Navy SEAL requirements. Yeah. It's like, dude.
And what do you attribute that to? Like, how do you think he was able to transform from who he was as a kid to being Navy SEAL and running, all of that?
I think just from my take on what I think is possible, we all have that voice in our head that knows what our best is. Like, at least like with me, I've got that voice that knows like what the absolute best thing to do is right now. And like, do I hit snooze on that, or do I do like, it varies from decision to decision. But I think he went all in on just completely trusting that voice of like what the absolute best and going with it. He's like, what if I do this for 3 months? I think you get fed up and tired with. I think we can get lulled into complacency, and it's suffocating. Like,
absolutely.
Just being comfortable, but like not completely satisfied, and being at like 60% of like where you want to be, or 50% of where you want to be, and being like, well, I'm surviving and I'm okay. And if something major does come up, yeah, that would be stressful, but most of the time it doesn't, so I don't have to really stress.
Yeah.
I think being in that weird middle, the middle where you focus your time on pleasing others, but you can never please everybody. No matter how catering you are, someone's always going to find flaws. So if you spend your time trying to do that, you then yourself aren't making yourself happy, because you're not doing it, and you're compromising the things you want to do to make other people happy. So you're in this weird middle, and it's just like, you got to go on in on like, what do you think the music inside you is? What do you think makes you best? And like, when you think about doing something for at least 40, 50, 60 hours a week, how does it make you feel? Like,
yeah.
if you're like, if you take that vacation and you're not excited to come back because you're like, man, this gave me inspiration for this and this and this and this, you're in the wrong thing.
Yeah. And you need to start a plan to work towards that thing. Based on those videos with David Goggins, it's the, like he said, we work on a 40% capacity. Like, that is what our normal is. And to think that is less than half. Yeah. Like, where could you be if you just turned it up a notch? It doesn't have to be turning it up to full 60% that's left.
Even 40 to 60 is a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, extra 20% effort per day, how much is that going to compound?
Yeah. And then where's our mind in that, and where do we think we are each day? We think we're at 85, 90 each day. Yeah. But if we're really at 40 compared to where we think we are, then just imagine we're like.
What does that look like over the span of 5 years, or 10 years, 20 years? How big does that gap grow?
So why do it? Why make the extra effort?
Like, why should you make the extra effort?
That's what a lot of people, the overachievers, or they have their, like, I want to be the overachiever. I want to show people that I'm this, I'm that, I'm better, I'm the best, or whatever. But what about the people that sit back and think, I don't really care to be the best?
See, that's where I think that has to be answered inside yourself. like I think we're so unique as people. Like each person has, you know, unique experiences. Slightly, there's no one person that's made the exact same choices throughout their whole life. Like we're unique, and I think that comes within you based on your experiences, based on what your desires are. Like it's finding something in you that it's like, I want to do this for me. Like I want to get good at this for me. Like it might not make any money. Nobody might watch this, but like I'm doing it for me, and I'm doing it because I feel it's something I have to do.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an obligation to like yourself. I think that like, I don't think people focus enough time trying to find that. They just, we're at 18 years old, and for whatever reason we're told, okay, you're done learning. You know, society tells you, okay, you're done learning. As far as like growing your mind, more like not concrete or skill specific stuff. It's like, okay, all of your big thinking and stuff gets out of the way at 18, and then you find a skill and you go after it, and that's it. And it's like,
that's not how it is.
Yeah. I wonder back before like modern civilization as we know it, kind of like before Industrial Revolution, stuff like that. I wonder how long the transition period was between like childhood, teenager, and like adulthood, as far as like I wonder what that process looked like. Because here I feel like nowadays there's not really a like window of like growing up. I mean, I guess that's what college is for. That's what it's supposed to be for.
Yeah.
But I mean, we all see that it doesn't help. Like you learn textbook type stuff, but you don't learn life skills. Exactly. As far as like how to handle yourself, how to make hard decisions, all that stuff. So I wonder what that process used to look like, and like how do we stray away? Because you got to think where we were as humans. You know, think about Moses' times. Like they had to walk. Those dudes had to walk out of Egypt, and now you can get anywhere in the world in under 2 days, from any location. Like it's insane. So like we're obviously a resilient species, and we've gotten to a point where we have made this planet work for us, you know, and so we have that kind of capability. But like, where is that lost to where so many people just end up dying a copy of other people when they could have had a unique thing that they could have impacted the world with?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that initial, you have to have that initial thought that there's, that we're here for a reason, not just to live.
Mm-hmm.
We're all gonna die, and so you have to have, there's something bigger and better there, and so if you can figure that out, and then, you know, from you know, if we're here for a reason, and that reason is for God's will,
mm-hmm.
then we have our purpose. What is our purpose in that? In His will, because His will is that all men come to Him, and that's the trueness of it. Now, we have to live in this physical life. We have to be here. We have to, you know, feed ourselves, and we have to live. So there's a physical aspect to it. So now you start thinking, okay, what is my role, and that plays into His will?
Yeah. Where do those two converge?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so that's what that's what everybody's trying to figure out. Mm-hmm. Is what is my purpose? What is my purpose with God's purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do those two merge? And if you can find that, it gives you that strength and that power. And I mean, I think that is what kind of helps you, you know, move from that 40 to 60%. But from David Goggins' perspective, I mean, he probably wasn't sitting there thinking, I'm running this 100-mile thing, and he may not have known his purpose or his idea of what he does now.
Yeah.
But now he's like, I want to impact the world in this way.
Yeah.
And for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, you know, I don't think we'll ever know. We never know exactly where we are today of what that impact is going to be 10 years from now.
And I think he's a good example. Him and Jeff Bezos are two good examples of when you stress your mental capacity, like you go from that 40%, and then what at the time is 90%, there you like unlock a new level almost, and then that 90% then becomes 70 or whatever. I think it's scalable.
Absolutely.
Because I think your brain gets so efficient at doing things, like our brain. I forget the exact data, but I think something like 70 or 80% of our brain's function is just patterns and habits. Yeah. It's just things that it can do on autopilot, so you can spend time thinking or whatever, daydreaming, whatever. So it likes to run things in the background. So my point in saying that, you run 100 miles for 8 weekends in a row. I mean, that's what he did. He ran 8 100-mile races 8 weeks in a row, which is crazy. Normally, after you run a 100-mile race, you're out for 6 months recovering. So he did it. So you unlock that. I mean, your potential is different. Yeah. I believe after that. Like same with Jeff Bezos. There's a photo of him that I saw the other day when they were first starting. It's him in this little desk, small, like I'd say probably 8x10 office, maybe 6x8 office, something small. Desk takes up most of the room. He's got a banner spray painted that says Amazon.com. And, you know, his 100% at that time is different than his 100% now.
Absolutely.
Based on his influence, his reach.
And you hope it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's grown, and, like, I'm sure he didn't... Even if he was optimistic, I don't know if he saw it this big when he was selling books. You know?
Exactly. Well, I think that's key, is you don't want to put a cap on it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you put a cap on it, you're going to reach it and you're going to stop.
Yep.
And that's why you have to have what they call the BHAG, and I can't remember who maybe Jim Collins, but the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Okay.
Like, you want something so far out there that you can't even imagine accomplishing. Because now you have to have your other goals. That way you have to have those milestones that you do hit, so that it keeps you motivated to keep going. But you got to have something out there, like, you know, for me, it's, you know, my business is, I have what I can picture in my head, but I'm not limiting it to that picture. Like, right. What I think of today is probably not going to be the same, you know. Yeah,
and it shouldn't be. If it is, Ed Mylett has this good saying. Ed Mylett he's like a performance coach. He's the guy that a lot of baseball players call, like, when they're in a slump or something like that. He helps. It's a mind thing a lot of times. When you're not hitting, it's your mind, and so he helps them get out of that slump. But he has a belief that it's being grateful for where you are, but knowing that's not enough.
Yeah. So
he's thankful for where he's at, the person he is. He loves the person he is, but he knows a year from now, it's not adequate for where he wants to be. Yeah. It's not adequate. It's like, sorry, I love you. Like, you're doing great. I love where you're heading. I love the choices you're making. But for where I want to go, we need some improvement. And even if that's a little bit day by day, like, we just need some improvement if I want to take you where I know you want to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's being honest with yourself on both sides, but not hating yourself and getting into where people that have, like, eating disorders and stuff, they beat themselves up consistently, and there's no payoff of, like, you're doing good.
Yeah. Absolutely. The biggest thing just tying to that whole mindset is we are what we think about. We are who we hang around with. Mm-hmm. And so if you hang around with people that you don't want to be, then you're going to end up, you know, being that person. Mm-hmm. And so because you're telling yourself that that's okay, you're telling yourself in that subconscious mind of, hey, I like these people. This is okay. This is, you know, what I want. And so, you know, having your maybe friends that you've had for, you know, 20 years or whatever, but it's someone that you may not, maybe they don't have the same aspirations or same motivation that you do now. And so the more you hang around with them, the lower that acceptability in your mind.
Yeah, you kind of lower your frequency to theirs rather than having a high frequency for wanting big things.
And then when you have we were talking about going to that 90%, and you get up to that 90%, but that as you do more at 90%, it kind of brings you back. Now you have it's like
your floor raises.
Exactly. So are we ever going to reach that capacity?
Yeah.
And from David Goggins' perspective, he's like, we're working at a 40%, and I think that's why he put it so low.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time you get up to 80, that 100's moved to 150. Now you're still far away from it, because we are creatures of habit, and we are able to do more the more we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time I managed a project was horrible. I did it, but it wasn't efficient. And so the more efficient, the more things you can do within that minute, within that hour, within that day. And so now, like the first day I did, a major project, I'm at 100% capacity in my mind.
You're stressing out. You're like, holy smokes, let me check the soil, let me taste it, make sure everything's perfect. So then,
6 weeks later, when I've had 3 projects or 3 major projects in, my day is so much different now that I'm managing 3 projects in that day.
Yep.
And I'm at 70% capacity.
Yeah.
I'm not at that 100 anymore.
And you're also doing another task. Like you're like, okay, I got that. It's like what's so fascinating, it's a lot of work up front, like as far as like going after something or building a business or learning a new skill, like to do it correctly and do it easily, like as far as long term easily. I wouldn't say easy is the right word. I'd say more efficiently. Yeah. You take your mental energy up front to really learn the skill, make all the mistakes, like just jump in, and then most times it only takes depending on the difficulty of the skill, a few weeks to get decent at it, to for harder, more challenging things, several months, maybe even a year. But in the grand scheme of things, a year is not that long. So you do that work up front, and then you've learned it, you've got it, and it's just maintenance at that point to keep the skill, and then you can kind of almost put it on autopilot a little bit. Like, you got to think about it, but you're wired, like you've made that wiring connection in your brain to know how to do it and do it well and efficiently.
Absolutely. And that's where I think that's where people can get into that slump of, I'm always reaching for something that's not attainable or not achievable, and they get demotivated because of that. Like, so how do you think we can, you get away from that moral or that motivation, a lack of motivation from that thought?
So I think in order to do that, we need to reframe how we look at failure. So
good point.
You have to love and embrace failure in order to really get where you want to get. Like, my goals for this week, I failed at probably half of them, but so I probably failed at half of my goals this week, but I made them difficult. Like, I made the goals I had difficult, and like for the quality I want and for the timeline I wanted to get it done and the workload and everything that I have going on, I made them difficult and hard to reach. Like it's like when I plan my goals, it's like, okay, if I had a perfect week, what does it look like right now? And they're gonna move as I get better. Yeah. Like it's gonna be something more difficult or learning a new skill or whatever. But if I don't hit them, that's great, because if I hit my best goals, then I have no way to get better. Yeah. So if you set those goals, if you set those goals to where like maybe you didn't get them, or like you still are like, I hit the goal, but like I'd say it was 70% quality, versus the 100% quality I want. So doing those goals to where they're hard to hit, and you hit some of them and you feel good about those ones you did hit, and then the ones you don't hit, you're like, that's great, because celebrate those wins that you hit, and then the ones you didn't, you're like, okay, how do we re-strategize for next week to hit it? And so failure is just showing, all it is exposing like what you did wrong. That's all failure. And like wrong isn't bad either. It's just
wrong is learning.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can get comfortable and accepting of failure is good, and failure builds you up and failure helps you grow, then you've got to look at it that way. Because if you set goals and you're taught that, like, you know, in school it's A's, or if you don't get A's, like you're a bad student, you're a bad kid, you're a troubled kid, you're dumb, you know, instead of, I don't know, it's just how we as society look at failure, I think, causes people to get demotivated by not hitting goals. But it's like, that's part of the process. That's good. That means you attempted something that was difficult. If you fail, if there's room for failure, then that means you're getting the right goals.
Absolutely.
I mean, Edison with the light bulb, what is it? Mm-hmm. I always say, like, he had 900 and something times that he failed, but then he's like, I think he had tested as 990 times that he figured out how it didn't work. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a failure. It was more of a, hey, this is what doesn't work, so let me figure out what works. So you got to keep at it, or keep at that. And that's where our different personalities are different. How we think, how we operate personally affects our day-to-day. Mm-hmm. Is because the way I think, the way I do things, the way I learn, the way I manage things is different than anybody. Yeah. So I've got to know that within myself. I can't put myself with, I have to learn the way he learns, or I have to learn you learn. And so if I do that, I'm capping myself to someone else's standard that I can't meet. And now, not saying we have our own standard that we can meet, because that standard continues to rise. But I think we have to, at least at some level, decide, okay, this is where my, this is me, and how do I, learn and grow from this. So when I do this thing, did it do well?
Yeah.
And that's where rabbit trail, but the 2020, hindsight's 2020. Hindsight's not 2020.
Yep.
Because you have more knowledge, but even with that more knowledge, you're going to make a decision that, 30 minutes from now, you would have made a different decision.
Yeah.
And 30 minutes from then, you'd have made another, so it's an ongoing different mindset, because you have more knowledge, you have more wisdom behind it. As long as you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
If you don't care, then you're not even thinking where we're at.
Yeah. Well, that's a big thing. Like, I remember when I was a kid, and like I'd get in an argument at school or whatever, and like maybe I lost the verbal argument, and then you're sitting in the shower like 3 hours later, you're like, I could have said this, I should have said that. If I'd have told him that, he wouldn't have known what to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, the more you think about something, you're like, oh, okay, I can see more. There's more data. There's, what you're saying, 30 minutes from now, if you're thinking about something for 30 minutes, it's going to be a totally different concept. Yeah. Like, that's the big thing that doing, like, the ads format, like, making the marketing videos and, like, doing the whole process of filming. And I'm thinking at the end of mine, like, okay, how am I going to market this? Not just creating the film. So that starts from the camera movement. So, like, thinking about the end product backwards.
Begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, and what I thought I was going to do in the beginning, I do extra footage. I just film as much as I can and try and do movements and all this stuff to try and just give me options. And I had a general, like, template that I was going to do. And then once I got all the footage together, I'm like, oh, no, I can do this. And I had to add, like, 2 more things of footage, like, later that I didn't need to be at the location for. Yeah. But, like, it's a totally different concept, and it grows, and it gets better, and it has improvement the more you, like, concentrate on it. So, like, a big part of, like, this week was really brainstorming, just looking at the footage, brainstorming how it's going to all come together, how it's going to be the most appealing, and then the editing process is, I'm getting better and better at it. So what used to take me 20 plus hours to edit, I can do in like 14, which that's big improvement from week to week. So if I keep just practicing at it, then eventually that's going to be something I can do in 4 to 6 hours. So I'm going to know all the hotkeys. I'm going to know exactly what I'm looking for. I'm not going to be like, I'm doing just a lot of testing right now. Like, I was watching this podcast called Impact Theory, and he had a guest on there he was raised by 2 scientists, and it taught him to approach his life using the scientific method. So it's like, what's my hypothesis as far as like, what do I want to do? What's my hypothesis? I'm going to butcher the scientific method because I don't know it that well, but basically testing, getting data, readjusting, new hypothesis, testing, getting data back. Like, it's just a constant process of that in your own personal life. And so if I approach it that way, it's like, okay, let me test, let me try doing this, knowing that like working hard at something is part of like getting accurate data back.
Absolutely.
So like not almost trying to take the emotion out of it, but it's like you almost look at it like scientific, like, okay, if the data is not going to be accurate if my effort isn't, you know, within this desired range, the 70 to 80% or whatever. If I'm not giving my best effort, then the data is going to be skewed and my experiment makes no sense anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, the way we do that subconsciously all the time. Like, we're always gathering data, testing our thought, and then going back and, oh, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
No, that conversation didn't go well.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever it may be. And you were talking about your you know, editing and stuff, and, you know, when you first start that, in my head, like, when I start anything, I want to be the most efficient first off, right off the bat.
Yeah.
Like, that's my mind. Like,
I want to be Michelangelo. I want to be Michelangelo day one of, I bought my first paintbrush, and it's like, okay, I'm Michelangelo now. Yeah. I have to be.
And that's where my mind is.
Yeah.
And so you have to, and I'm sure most people are that way, but we have to, you have to get away from that and accept failure. Accept some of that. Oh, I didn't do that well. But you can't just not do it well and then never think about it. Like, there has to be that reflection of what did go well, what didn't, and how do I mean, just the practice of editing and like when you're filming, even practicing, like filming it, you know, or you start to see, okay, this angle's better for this, or I need to be thinking, you know, begin with the end in mind. You weren't thinking, oh, I need to video this part over here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, me not knowing anything about it, I can just see that you're able to be more efficient day by day because you're starting to bring the end and the beginning together up front.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see where you need to be.
Yeah, and by doing that, it shortens the middle.
Yeah.
If you're thinking with the end, you're like, okay, I'm going to build myself bridges here so that I can get there quicker.
Exactly.
Rather than, I remember my first video took forever and it looked like shit. Like it.
And you had to spend hours editing.
Oh yeah, I spent like a week like really working on this just to realize like this sucks.
Yeah.
Like this is, I didn't film, I hadn't done it before. I hadn't done the like a real edit. Like when I mean editing, like I'm trying to make something as good as I can, meaning like I want to actually entertain someone. Like I want someone to spend 20 minutes of their time, which is valuable, which we all only get a certain amount of. It has to be good enough for someone to like trade in their 20 minutes to hear what I have to say. So for me, if I want to get as many people to do that as possible, it's got to look as good as possible as I have within my means right now. And that's scalable too. But so when I started, it was, I have never done this process before. So I'm just going to film what I think is cool. And then as I'm learning more editing techniques, I'm like, oh, if I would have just added some movement there, or if I would do a sweeping motion, I noticed like stills versus subtle movement of the camera, like it adds way more depth to like what you're doing. So like if there's like a small sweeping motion, or like what I want to eventually do with this is get one here, like I would like 3, get one here that gets your face. So when you're talking, it's like you're in the camera. Transitions can be middle, and then have one here on my face, and just the more like it's all taking the same amount of time. it's building on that skill and reinvesting into the skill. So when I make money off of marketing stuff, some of that budget's going to advancement and equipment. Next thing I'm going to get is a what's called a shotgun mic. So on here, it can plug into here, and they have one that's either wired, they can sit on top of that tripod and like go out, and what it does is it only picks up the sound from here rather than everything. Or they have one that like can fold out like that. So like that's something that's gonna cost like $60 or $70. Like it's just.
But that's next step. It's that
exactly.
Next quality of, and that's the key though. You have to deal with what you have and make the most quality. It may not be the best quality out there, but it's what you're doing. What you have, the best quality with what you have, and I think that's a life thing. Like, if you're not living up to your best quality, then you're selling yourself short.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying you're better than someone else that's 10 years ahead of you in whatever field, but you got to sell yourself at your best quality, not at half of that.
Yeah, that's not a fair fight if you're trying to compare yourself. That's where you were at. That you're where they were at 10 years ago. Yeah. They have 10 years ahead of you, and you have to assume that they're going to keep working, so they're always going to be 10 years ahead of you. Yeah. It just is what it is. But maybe not always 10 years ahead of you. You can learn from people, and you can get to where you're only 5 years behind them. Yeah. And that's a big difference.
Absolutely. And you can even pass them.
Yeah, exactly. That's true as well, but they're like right now where you're at, you can't compare yourself to someone who's got 10 years into it, you know?
It's like comparing me to Dave Ramsey. Like
exactly. But who knows? Maybe you do something that's even more impactful. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
You know?
Like there's no reason to not believe.
Yeah. Yeah, but why would you go into doing something? I want to help people out, but I don't want to help too many people out.
Exactly.
You know?
Like,
that makes
I
no
don't want to
sense.
help more than him.
Yeah.
Or I'll never help more than him. He's helped too many people.
Yeah.
Well, he's got his way of doing it. And maybe he impacts people in his way, or they're in their team, but then I've got whatever my way is, it impacts them in that way and impacts more people for a different reason. But
I've kind of got a bold statement that might offend people. I think that not valuing yourself is one of the most selfish things you can do.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you don't know if you give your effort, you don't know who that can impact.
Yeah.
And you're selling yourself short, and by doing that, maybe there's something that someone needed to hear that they never did because you weren't in the situation where you needed to be in, because you weren't being honest with yourself. So by doing that, it's a chain reaction of there's one person, there's maybe thousands of people, who knows, there's people that had the potential to impact millions of people that did nothing about it because they didn't look in themselves and say, hey, you've got better than this. That's where you're saying you compare yourself to like these super successful people in the same field, and like equipment's a big one. Like there's people that they're like, oh, I gotta buy $8,000 worth of equipment before I even start. And it's like that's putting the cart in front of the horse for sure. Like, find your horse first. Find your horse first. Make sure it runs. Make sure it's fed. Make sure it's not going to kill over and die. Yeah. And then invest in the cart. Yeah. You know.
And that's in a personal, experience too. I mean, even, we just built a house. We could come in and just full blown stock it. We could put this and that, and I mean, I've got a list of things I want to do, and I want the items I want to get, and to have this perfect house. But even if I got all of those, I'd still find more things to get to make it perfect, because it would never be. Because my perfect moves, just like our capacity moves, are the perfect, like, and people talk about building a dream home. Well, your dream home is your dream today, but tomorrow it's not, because in the middle of you building your dream home, your dream changes. And so just in subtle differences of the house, and then our dream of a home is capped by our ability to pay. So if there was unlimited money, then you could build unlimited.
The house would look different if there was unlimited
absolutely.
money. Yeah.
but you would. I mean, there would still be some limit somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but that the level of dream is always moving,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's what. And like you said, you have to be content at some level, and so being content at, I'm going to start this with an iPhone, or I'm going to start this with, back 10, 20 years ago, it was an actual video camera. They didn't have iPhones, So it was that you have to start with what you can start with.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to put an asterisk there. Start with what you can, asterisk, because, like, I think so many people are like, well, this is what I got, but it's like, max that out.
Exactly.
So, like, for me, I've got, yes, it's on this phone, but there's a camera app I paid like $17 for. Completely changes how it lets you manually take control of everything on the camera and turn it in, like, fully unlock everything it's capable of, to what scene you want or whatever. And so it's like fully max out what you've got.
And max out your knowledge, because you and I are completely 180 degrees in this field, because I know how to take a picture and take a video.
Yeah.
I can edit the video by drawing a blue line on it. That's about as far as I can go, because I just don't know it.
Yeah.
I haven't dove into what can an iPhone do. I've seen the post, scrolling through Facebook saying, "Are you using your iPhone to the fullest capabilities?" Well, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But we have this giant computer in our hands, but we use it to call people, to text, and to get on social media. Like, that's 90% of it.
We're at such an advantage because this, like, in our hands, what we've got is more than probably Bill Clinton had in the White House.
Absolutely.
We have more capability in our pocket.
hands. Yeah.
So, like,
so what are you waiting on?
if you're gonna start a business, like, you have a shortcut.
Yeah.
You've got access to any of the information you want, like, whatever you want. The thing is, yes, I know all this stuff about it, but I didn't know about it probably 6 weeks to 2 months ago. I knew nothing about it. And it's funny, a friend of mine, he got in a good opportunity to where he's gonna be able to do independent contracting for, like, roofing inspections, and, like, he found a company where it's, like, through insurance companies, they're backed by it, rather than an outside guy that you're bringing in.
Yeah.
So, like, they get preferred clients from this insurance company and stuff. So he's got a good opportunity there, but, like, he's afraid of being on roofs. He knows nothing about roofs. And I told him this story of my first day on the job as a mechanic, and, like, how I got the job. I was transparent with him. I was like, look, I've worked on my own cars. I listed out the jobs I had done before, and what sold him is the cover letter I wrote saying, I think I'm built for the job because I know, like, I do the same with people. Like, I process the information, and that's where I get my diagnosis from. So I look at the problem, process the supporting information, come to a conclusion and plan of attack, readjust. Like, I was like, so I think I'm built for this. I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
And he took a chance on me. I got the job by being honest. And my first day on the job, I quickly realized I'm not working in the driveway.
Yeah.
There's customers in the waiting room, and I'm under the clock, and he's got somewhere to be. And this job says it takes this many hours. That's how many hours it needs to take.
And someone's counting on you.
Someone's counting on me, yeah. So
to do your job
my first day, I had no idea what I was looking for. The check engine light was on. I barely knew how to use a scan tool. Like, I'm like, okay, this is this code. Let me look up everything. Like, I was really trying to use my phone to learn. And anyway, I changed spark plugs. I don't even think it does anything. I would probably know what's wrong with the car now, based on the knowledge I've gotten. But at the time, I didn't know what I didn't know. And putting the ignition coils on, which the ignition coils are what sends the signal to help the spark plugs fire. And when I put the bolt in, I did it too tight, and I sheared the bolt. And, like, that makes the car misfire if it doesn't have that connector. So we had to put a self-tapping screw in it and get it to stay on there. And that's my first day. Got my ass kicked. and I feel so defeated. Second day, got my ass kicked again. I didn't fix whatever. I was just making so many mistakes. Not anything that was like blowing up people's cars or anything like that. But I was making mistakes. And so by day 3, like, I'm feeling so down. I talked to Kayla, my wife, and I'm like, I think I'm just going to talk to him, tell him that, you know, I gave this a good run, this and that, to kind of say my goodbyes. I even go up there, I'm almost crying. Like, my pride is hurt because I look like an idiot. And, like, I put myself out there to look like an idiot. And so I go up to the office. I'm, like, basically saying my thank you, farewell, you know, thanks for the opportunity. I don't think that I'm at the skill level you need right now. And he's like, well, hold on. He's like, wait a minute. You've been nothing but honest with me up front. You told me this was your skill set, you know, but you can learn quickly. And I'd been there 3 days, so he didn't expect me to know everything then. I was fortunate to have him as a boss that was understanding. And he was like, well, hold on. So what we'll do is we'll attack it as a team until you're on your own 2 feet. And I was fortunate to have a guy that he wasn't a mechanic, but he taught engine building class in Honduras before he came over to the States. So he had some technical knowledge. I leaned on him. And then YouTube. And then he paid for a couple of classes for me to go to, some online classes to take that I could just study. And you know, I did 4 or 5 classes as well. And between all of that, you know, at night, it was going home and learning on YouTube about seeing. There's this YouTube channel called Eric the Car Guy, and he was like a master technician for Honda and Acura for like 10 plus years, and owns his own shop now. But he treats his YouTube channel like it's automotive class. He's so detailed, and he's got hundreds and hundreds of videos out, and he's been doing it for 10 years. So I'm able to access 10 years of information, like, from my phone.
For free.
Yeah. And so I go from that to within a year, I'm separating the chassis from the car to replace bushings. I'm pulling engines out. Like, I'm completely redoing AC like systems, anything. I'm completely disassembling a suspension, doing all of the suspension components. Like, I'm doing all of this stuff, working on Range Rovers, which you're not supposed to be able to work on unless you go to Range Rover school, basically. And I'm learning all of this stuff within a year because I'm not afraid to fail. Yeah. It's like, okay, I build myself. I try and mitigate my failure. Like, I never took anything to where, because it's other people's cars. Like, if it was my car, whatever, I'll deal. I can always fix it. But I build myself a bridge to where, if I'm at a point of no return and I don't know how it's going to turn out, I can work my way back. But taking calculated risks, and failing and learning and reapplying, and so I told that story to him. And I'm like, less than a year, I'm doing what a full-time mechanic it's supposed to take years to learn, or the only people you hear about being mechanics, their dad was one, and like. For a lot of people, they've been working on cars since they were 15, and it's like, I learned this in 8 months, And granted, I'm not saying I'm at that level, but I would say I'm probably 85% of the way there, and they've got the extra 15 of like the technical nuances and whatever specific skill. But I can fix most things. Yeah. I got to that point, and if I don't know how to fix it right now, I can learn it. I know where to look to where I can learn. So. I was telling him that, so it's like, if you're okay with the temporary failure, like, the other side of it is so much greater.
Oh, absolutely, and that's, you have to get past that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that first, and in any job, that first, couple days or months or weeks. I mean, it can be months. I mean, I remember starting the job at Pine Medics was 6-8 months in.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, crap, is this really what I want to do? Is this really, do I like this? Am I good at this? But I'm screwing up here. I'm screwing up there.
Mm-hmm.
This is 6 months in where I'm like, I should know what the heck I'm doing, and I'm still screwing up. But the reality is you're never reaching that perfect because your duties change, your responsibilities change, that the level of perfection changes, and so you're always going to have to deal with a failure. And I think if you start to realize you don't have failure, is you're just coasting. You're not pushing yourself. You're not trying to do something different. But even then, I mean, we're human. We're not going to be. We're always going to have a problem with where we're at. And I think if the two sides of it is, if you feel like you're at a problem and you don't like where you're at, but you're not doing something to change it, then you have no, like, you can't just sit back and, I mean, it's the definition of insanity. If you do something over and over again and expect a different result, that's insanity. It doesn't make any sense. And so just realizing that you have to push through that complete failure of the beginning of anything, business and it may be a business that you are so passionate about, you know a lot about, but it's the insecurities in yourself that cause you to fail at this, fail at that, and so you have that mentality of, I'm not good at this, I don't need to be doing this, and you want to back out. I mean, I've done it with mine. Like, with my business, is the first couple months, and I wasn't working on it daily. It was just a kind of a couple days a week type of thing, and it was more of a, do I have what it takes to, do I have enough knowledge in this financial world to help people? Well, I don't have to have enough knowledge in the financial world to help people. Like, I can just help people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I have life experience that they can.
I think how you look at it, like, I think how you look at it, and if not, like, this would be a good way to look at it, but I see it in your actions, is that you kind of think about it is, can I help somebody right now? Am I ahead? Can I, like, shorten the gap for someone?
Absolutely.
Like, maybe you can't shorten the gap for Warren Buffett right now. Like, he's
got to figure it out.
Yeah, he's pretty skilled. He's pretty skilled, but maybe there's someone down the street that, like, doesn't know the concepts that you know, and you can teach that to them, and you can shorten their curve. So it's all about, maybe you can't shorten the world's curve, right? Maybe not right now, but maybe you can at one point. But you can shorten other people's curves.
Absolutely.
And it's about, one thing I want to teach my son, like, from the time he can understand, of, like, how to earn money. If you can solve a problem, if you can solve someone's problem or multiple people's problem, and the better you can solve problems, the more money you earn.
Absolutely.
So it's all about, and it shouldn't necessarily, like, money's not, like, always the exact motivation, but, like, I feel as humans, like, solving other people's problems and, like, solving problems, like, that's what it's about. That's, that's the good thing to do. Think of where you're working now, you're just getting paid because you're solving a problem, whatever standard job it is, whether that's, checking out, like, being a cashier. They're starting to automate that to where you can do it yourself. But, like, if you're mixing paint, like, you're solving, like, someone needs this color, they brought this color to you, and you're able to, because of the skills you've learned, you're able to create that color for them, or you know where to find it, and you're shortening. They don't have to go look up how to mix paint and all this stuff, or if you know where it is, they're not having to wander around the aisles and look for it. You're solving someone's problem, and you're saving them time, and so they're willing to trade you money for saving them time.
I mean, that's as simple as, you fast food restaurant. I mean, the cashier, that they sit there and think, well, I'm at a mindless job, but you're still solving a problem. You're solving that client that comes in has an issue with, they don't have enough time to go home, cook something, eat it, and then go back to work. So you're saving them time, and you're using your abilities, your skills to help them in that process.
Or it could even just be for the convenience sake.
Absolutely.
Like, before we started really getting into budgeting, recently, and we haven't been like this in a while. We noticed the problem and adjusted it, but there was a point where $1,200 a month was going to that convenience of having food immediately, and our body paid the consequence. Like, we didn't look great, and you know our wallets paid the consequence for that. It's like, yeah, you have that community, but it's gonna be at a cost. My point in saying that is, you don't know what someone values, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
If someone's willing to pay for it, then it's worth that, you know. So
yeah, we've gone into that conversation
yeah,
before.
what's a painting worth? Well, I might think a Picasso painting's only worth $15, but there's someone paying millions and millions of dollars for it, you know, and therefore it's worth that.
Yeah,
it's
and
worth whatever the highest bidder's willing to pay for
absolutely.
something like that.
And that's where you gotta get out of your mindset of sometimes where people are like, well, it's not worth $50, or it's not worth.
Maybe not to you,
but somebody may pay for it. So it still is worth it, just not to you or not to whoever.
Yep.
But and that's the value we put on anything. Like we put, you know, is my time worth doing this action? And or am I going to get a return on this action, especially business wise? Like that's a struggle for me in my business. Is I'm working 20-30 hours a week now on my business. I'm not getting paid. I'm getting paid less than $1 an hour if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
Like it's not, my return is not getting. I'm not getting a return on my time right now. But I have to accept that because I know that there's a future of, okay, I'm not efficient now, but as I get down the road, I become more efficient and more, I grow the business and more, I start to make more money, which becomes more efficient, which ultimately means I'm helping more people. And I think that's where the majority of it is that you've got to understand that there's a level of that learning curve, that beginning. There's a reason the exponential growth curve is so low, so flat for the longest time, and then all of a sudden it jumps up.
Yeah, I was like just about to bring that up. Like, there's this guy named Andy Frisella. He believes success curve looks just like a hockey stick. Yeah. It's nobody sees. They think that's just flat ground. Yeah. You look at the curve.
It's so close.
You think it's so close to zero, and then it gets a little thicker, and then all of a sudden that fan comes up, and then all of a sudden you're up. Yeah. And then they're like, "Oh, whoa! I saw you from here to here," but they didn't see all of this time. They only see the 6 months.
It's the overnight success that took 20 years.
There was I don't know if I talked to you about this last week. I think I watched it this week, but I was watching a podcast between Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart, and he was talking about. Joe brought up the question of like, when was your moment? Like, what was that moment? What was that time that like you're like, this is something. Like my career's taking like, I'm on a different level now. Like I'm getting out of here and I'm starting to really get successful. He said it was something totally unexpected. He had just done his first comedy short, gotten a little bit of traction, and then he was about to record this one called Seriously Funny, and he meant it like, I've been putting the work in, I've been mastering my craft, I'm seriously funny, like seriously, I'm good at this, like I'm ready. And so right before it, there was this Shaq did this all-star comedy jam, and it had a pretty decent lineup, and they asked if he wanted to do it. His agent asked if he wanted to do it, and he's like, well, shit, I'm recording this in like 2 months, 3 months. I don't want to burn my material. Like, just use whatever. Like, it's just going to be 15 minutes. You use the stuff that you want to use. So he had no pressure in the situation. He's like, all right, I'll go into it. I'll do it, whatever. And does great. There's no stress. He's just using, like, other stuff that isn't going to make it into his special. And then all of a sudden, well, when he was like, this could be big, is he was the last person when it ended. It does a slow motion of him like doing the peace sign up and walking off stage, and like he was like, he felt like he's like, oh, this looks like this is the guy. Like he got goosebumps on that. And then after the special aired, he was in New York, and normally he did like 1 or 2 bookings like when he traveled, and for the next 8 days sold out show. Like, they were like, it's gone. Like, the tickets are gone. Do you want us to do another one for Wednesday? Sure. Hours later, it's gone. All the tickets are gone. Do you want to do Wednesday night? Do you got time? He's like, sure. So he was doing 1 or 2 a day for like 8 days straight, selling out. And he's like, it was right after it aired. Turns out Showtime was airing it like all the time, like several times a day nationwide, and just blew up. Seriously Funny came out, he crushed that, and then he just took off.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something he was even expecting. And he made a point. He's like, you don't know what that rocket fuel is going to be, so you better know how to drive a rocket. Because you get that fuel and you don't know how to drive that rocket, you're going to crash and burn.
I mean, I think that's where it comes into play where he didn't expect it, because and he may have expected it at some level at some point, but right then he didn't think he was on that curve right there. He thought he's still in the
he
growth.
Was in the work. He's like, we'll see what happens.
And that's, I think when we worked together, it was the S curve is what they call it. Like, our careers is on an S curve.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this, and you can create it to where it's, I guess you get to this point where you have this growth and you have this exponential hit, and then if you stay in that mindset, it levels back out.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you don't change something and drop it, like if you don't do something different or put yourself in another, maybe another position or another responsibility, then you can come back down to that growth. And so, like, most people's career is, okay, I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to work my way up to, okay, now I'm a manager.
Yep.
And then now I'm a CEO. Well, then you have to learn the CEO role.
Yeah. That's your new bottom, and then
growth.
That's curve up to now.
And now you're exponentially a better CEO. Well, now what? I mean, now you got to find something else that.
Now you're consulting Fortune 500 companies or whatever.
So you have to find something different to keep that flow of information, the flow of wisdom, flow of learning coming in and out. But that's where he didn't know he was on that, and you won't know that. You don't know where you are on that exactly. You have maybe a range of, okay, I'm just starting, I'm definitely over here.
Yeah.
But 6 months in, and then how quick is that?
Yep.
Like, is this like the timeline of, is it 0 to 1 year, or is it 0 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Is my growth at the 7-year mark that exponential?
Yeah.
Or is it at the 2-year mark?
Yeah.
And that's where, now it all depends on how much time you put in. Are you putting in 2 hours a week?
Yep.
Or 2 hours a month? It plays a big role. If you're putting 2 hours in on a business, it's going to take you a lot longer. But if you're putting 40 a week,
yeah, it's going to compound.
It's going to compound a lot quicker. And it's not about how much money it brings in. It's just a matter of how much more you learn and how quick you learn and grow to get to a certain point.
Yeah, because for anyone to be successful long term in a business, you can make quick cash. If you know how to market, you can make quick money through advertising. But if there's no meat to what you're offering, or if the value's not there, it won't. So, like, my point saying that time is spending on, like, you're creating that value to where once that opportunity hits, you've created so much value that you get that shot and you're like, boom. Yeah. It's an explosion because the value's there, and you just get enough eyeballs on it, or you meet the right person that can take that value proposition up. And it's all of these skills you've acquired. It's all of this discipline you've acquired. It's all the back end time. It makes it to where you feel like you're time traveling right there, absolutely. Because it's growing so quickly. You're like, wow, like 6 months ago to now, it's like we're in 2 totally different planets. But you were growing. You knew, like, I know within me I'm growing and, like, I'm changing. I'm like, oh, all of this change, like all of this growth. But from an outside perspective, you're in the same spot and all of a sudden you teleport.
Yeah.
But you've been growing this whole time. It's just the fruits of your labor haven't come, and that's where you look at, for a tree has to mature before it can fruit. Yeah, that could be years and years. I was I was talking to a guy where his family, they own a pretty big like walnut farm, or it's some sort of like tree nut farm, and they have something like, I think they have something ridiculous like either 20,000 acres or something massive, but they basically for all of Texas they supply walnuts. And I was asking him, I was like, so like from the time you plant to harvest, how long does it take the tree to be ready? And he said it's about 10 years. It's about 10 years of that tree maturing, growing, care before they can make money off of it.
Yeah. And think, I mean, most businesses are like, I'm not going to get a return for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I want a return tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know? And, I mean, I think it goes into our personal life, too. I mean, we want returns on anything we do tomorrow. Like, we want what we want, and we want it tomorrow, you know, or today, for that matter. But you got to be able to back off from that and have some level of content of where you're starting, or you're always pushing yourself beyond your limits, and it's causing you to. I'm not saying from a motivational standpoint, but from a actual financial, like, my abilities, I can't go buy $1 million house or whatever. Like, I just can't. I physically cannot do that. And so you have to live within the physical means. From a mental standpoint, go as far. I mean, push yourself to, whatever limit you want.
Yeah, this guy was doing. He was the CEO of Quest, and he does interviews. Like, he would interview. For a long time, he would personally do the interviews until it grew to where he's got 1,400 employees. He can't do the hiring process for everybody. His time isn't worth that. But when he was hiring those initial people, one of the questions he asked in every interview, he was like, all right, let's pretend, I think he used a water bottle. He's like, let's pretend this coffee mug isn't a coffee mug. It's a Magic Genie lamp. And you rub it, you get whatever wish you want. It's magic. Like, you get whatever you want. Like, there's no limits to what you can have. And he like prefaces it with that. And he's like, obviously you can't bring people back from the dead, like all that. Like, what within the normal means of, like, if it were a genie, what would you wish for? And granted, it's skewed a little bit because you're at a job interview. Some people would be like, a job, and it's like, okay. But like, what was so common and what blew his mind for the longest time, the most consistent answer was $1 million. And his thought was like, why don't $1 million won't even buy you a house in LA? Like, which is where I think he was running his company out of. And he's like, why don't you get $1 trillion? Why don't you get, and he realized to them, they're just thinking of an astronomical number to them.
Yeah. From where they are.
Yeah, so they're like $1 million might as well be $1 trillion.
Yeah. And
like, he had to realize that it was like where they were in life, the level they were at in life, that was an unreachable amount of money to them. They're like, I'm never gonna see it, so like $1 million, you know. And to him, he's not at that level. You know, $1 million is like, you know, he probably spends that in expenses at his company, you know.
Exactly.
So it's like
trying to tell a 5-year-old, you know, ask them how much is it. I mean, what is $1 million? What is $100 to them?
Yeah, what's a lot of money to you? $10 might be a lot to a kid, you know.
Exactly, and $1, you know, for that matter. I mean, they see. I mean, just the difference of seeing 4 quarters and $1 bill. They're like, oh, this is way much more. But they just don't get it at their level. Now, as they get older, then they start to see that means the same. But still, even then, it's like, okay, one piece of paper $100 bill and $1 bill, they look the same to them.
Or 20 $1 bills.
Exactly.
You know?
And then that's a lot more money than the $100 bill. And it's all about what they can see and what, based on their knowledge, their wisdom, that's what they think. And it's the same with as adults. We sit there and go, you know, I want $1 million because $1 million is so far from where I'm at right now.
So how was your week?
It was good. It was real good. They had a lot of, got a lot of it done. I think I have to go back and look, but I mean, it was very productive. Very. I mean, I think I may have missed one thing over the weekend that I didn't get done. Personal life got in the way.
Yeah.
Which is a struggle for sure, but I think it's good to. I mean, the week before was a complete failure, complete flop, and so it was. I mean, having the conversation about it was helpful.
Yeah.
I think had we not had that conversation last week, it was a complete flop.
Yeah.
It would have been like, so what? And I'd have let that drag on to this week and gone, well, I screwed up last week. I might as well screw up this week too.
Yeah.
But saying it out loud just gets it out there and goes, okay, that's not where I want to be. That's not my goal. And if I want to get to that goal, I've got to do some of this.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have a couple bad weeks or a couple bad days, but just having that long term of this is the long term vision. Like, I know what I need to do today to get there, but if I don't do it today, I've always got tomorrow to restart. And so that's just in that mindset. I was in 2 different mindsets in the 2 different weeks. Week before I was completely, and it's snowball effect on that, because the first day screws up, you're in that mindset of crap, I failed today, and then tomorrow, if you don't come out of that and you fail again, then tomorrow is a failure, and then it snowballs into the 3rd day, and you're like, by the 3rd day, you're like, well, crap, the week's half over now.
Yeah.
I might as well just
chalk it up,
and start over next week.
Yeah.
And I think starting over next week is only the mindset of I know we're gonna have this conversation a week from now, and so that's my restart, because that's where my accountability is. But if I have my accountability every day, then my restart is every day, not every week. And so in the financial world, we're having to build that self-accountability. Yeah, we have to have other people around us, but you also have to build that self-accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's with anything, with losing weight, with building a business, with your own personal finances. I mean, you have to have that ability to build yourself and understand where you are, and understand how you can, or how you work, how you think, so you can prevent yourself from failing day after day after day. Otherwise, it's a month after month after month. I mean, how many times do people on diets go, "Oh, I'll start next month"?
Yeah, or everybody wants to wait for Monday.
Yeah, well, and they wait for Monday. You could
start today, like now.
Yeah.
Your next meal. You could mess up breakfast and lunch and start dinner.
But it's that you want to give yourself that leeway of, I screwed up earlier, so now I can screw up the rest of the day. Yeah. And then tomorrow comes, and maybe you don't start tomorrow right, and like, well, I'll just start Monday.
Yeah.
And then Monday comes, and you don't start Monday, like, I'll just start next month. I'll start on the 1st.
Yep.
And
I think a big advantage to what we're doing too, and I think what I would encourage everybody to find someone to hold them accountable, not necessarily like in a judgmental way, but like in a loving way. What we're doing right now, people do once, maybe twice a year. I would say they do it at New Year's, and then some people reflect on their birthday as well, or like at a funeral. Like some people will reflect on life, but it's like it has to be like major events, and we're doing it 51 more times, even if we're not doing it that's just with somebody else, and then you get we're readjusting our course 52 times at minimum of the year. Let's say this is the only time we did it, and reflected on how we're doing and where we're headed. Like, think about how much more intentional you're going to be with your time. If 52 times out of the year, you're, at minimum, you're saying, okay, how have I been doing? Where do I want to go? Are they meeting up? If they're not, how do I need to adjust course?
Yeah.
Rather than once a year saying, well, where am I at? Where do I want to be? And then leaving it at that.
And because you lose track of that day too. I mean, that's what they, all the New Year's resolutions of growing and or losing weight or all, you know, people say I'm gonna get back in the gym, and like a lot of the people that go to the gym constantly, they're like, I'm gonna take my break in January because that's when the gyms are just so full.
Right.
And then you know, come March, all of the New Year's resolution people
they've
are gone
fallen off, yeah.
and they, you know, they're back into,
you know,
full gear.
Anywhere from 5% of them, you have a growth of about 5%, real growth of about 5%, and the rest of them have fallen off, and they'll be back next year. You know.
Exactly.
How you doing on time?
I think I'm gonna have to probably have to head.
You about wrapped up?
Yeah.
Okay. Got a cool shot of the horse back there. Just want to be on camera. That's cool.
Where he's not supposed to be.
Yeah.